You are listening to Lesson 2 Chapter 1 of Form 4 World History. Cameroon, General Education. Narrated by Wacheseh Academy. The Revolution in France in 1848. Causes? People wanted parliamentary reforms that would limit the powers of the monarchy, but King Louis-Philippe was against them. Hatred for the autocratic rule of Louis-Philippe. People wanted democratic institutions that would represent the interest of the people. Hatred for the limited franchise in French. Members of the Chambers of Deputies were very corrupt. Hatred for press censorship and persecution of journalists, who criticized the government. Hatred for the banning of political associations by the king. People were refused freedom of speech. King Louis-Philippe adopted a weak foreign policy that failed to bring glory to France. The general desire to revive the glorious past of Bonapartism in order to recover the former prestige of France as a great power. People wanted the establishment of a republic. Failure of King Louis-Philippe to improve on the educational facilities. The government failed to reduce the gap between the poor and the rich. The support is given to the revolutionaries by the army. Landlords kept many peasants landless. An increase in food prices united the people against the king. Unemployment was high in 1848. Poor working conditions of the factory workers. The course of the revolution. The holding of rallies called reforms banquets in Paris for liberal reforms projects against food crisis, etc. On the evening of February 23, a big crowd in Paris demonstrated against King Philippe. The Parisian crowd demanded sweeping political, economic and social changes. The king was blocked by soldiers and demonstrators. Arguments between two groups led to violence. Troops loyal to the king fired at the crowd. The king's National Guard could not overcome the Parisian crowd. King Louis-Philippe abdicated and fled to England. Why the revolution was successful in France? The revolutionaries had the support of the army. The king's National Guard was very weak and unable to resist the Parisian crowd. The revolutionaries had experienced fighters, full of determination and courage. The revolutionaries enjoyed a lot of domestic support because people were tired of high unemployment, food crisis, limited civil liberties, etc. The revolutionaries were united against the king. Louis-Philippe failed to receive external aid from Russia. King Louis-Philippe was a coward and could not mobilize support, he rather flees to England. Consequences of the revolution in France to 1870. It led to the abdication of Louis-Philippe. It brought an end to the Orleans dynasty in France. The establishment of a provisional government under leaders such as Lamartine, Blanc, and Martin. The national workshops gave 2 francs per day to anyone who found a job and 1 franc a day to those waiting for work. Assembly argued that the national workshops encouraged idleness, and insisted on the dismissal from the provisional government of Blanc and Albert. The adoption of the Republican Constitution in France. The Legislative Assembly replaced the Constituent Assembly. Extension of voting rights to adults above 21 years, thus broadening the electorates. Freedom of speech increased in France. In the December 1848 elections, Louis Napoleon Bonaparte was voted president. The election of a new Legislative Assembly took place in 1849. In 1852 Napoleon introduced a new constitution that established the Second Empire and he became known as Emperor Napoleon. Napoleon introduced economic reforms such as improvement of working conditions, expansion of coal and iron production, increased in the railway network, rapid industrial and commercial expansion, and freer trade by cutting tariffs on many French goods, and concluded many free trade treaties promoting international trade. Napoleon introduced social reforms through the promotion of urbanization and beautification of the city of Paris, improvement of higher education and training of teachers. Napoleon tolerated liberalization in the 1890s. Napoleon involved France in the Crimean War in 1854 against Russia, and it was in Paris that the Peace Congress took place in 1856 after the war. Napoleon signed the Plombier Pact with Cavour in December 1858, and France's forces defeated Austria, and handed Lombardy to Piedmont in 1859. In the Villafranca Truce of 1859, Savoy and Nice were given to France. Napoleon kept France troops in Rome and protected Rome until 1870.